Okay, so Sarah Garvey is the name that I took for myself. I took it for myself about 9 years ago. About 9 years ago, after studying heavily of the Nile Valley civilizations and cultures, from Nubia all the way up to Egypt, the name Sarah kept on popping up, and Sarah means son. It's two meanings. You can never put it son of the sun or son of God. So Sa means son and Ra means God or the sun. So the reason why I took Sarah as my name is because when you read into the teachings and stuff, like they would call someone a Sarah, like a son of God, meaning they bring the light, they're like a light giver, stuff like that. And I felt like the stuff that was going around in my head and the way in which I spoke to people, I felt like I was bringing some kind of light. Also, being a son of the sun, as you can see, I'm a dark individual, so I'm a son of the sun. So when it comes to Garvey was the second name I took because I read a lot of teachings of Marcus Garvey and they resonated with me. And I personally think that Marcus Garvey is probably the most prominent black leader of modern times. He's not spoken a lot about. A lot of people speak about like your Martin Luther Kings and your Malcolm X's and stuff like that, but without Garvey, you wouldn't even have had them. He done things like he had his own army, he had his own shipping company. He was really about black people coming together and actually looking at their economic base, growing their economics, growing their social status, and you also have to understand the reason why he was prominent for me is because he done that at a time where black people were still swinging from trees, like they were still being lynched, like they were just being lynched. Like people talk about others, and I'm like, this guy done that at a time where black people were literally swinging from trees by their necks, and he raised I guess a following of around 6 to 7 million just through newspapers. Do you know what I mean? Just being a journalist. Like now we can get 6 million followers on Twitter or on Instagram because we do something, put out a video or something like that. But this man literally was printing papers, printing leaflets, getting people out there, and really was about pushing black people forward. So that's the reason why I took the name Sarah Garvey.
Love that. In terms of you as a character individual, is there anything that you think people judge you on but don't truly understand?
Yeah, actually, people judge me on when I speak about religion. They think I'm an atheist. People always think that I'm an atheist because I question the Abrahamic religions all the time, but I'm not. I'm actually not an atheist. I don't follow the Abrahamic religions. I call myself a pantheist. So a pantheist is someone who basically has the thought process that everything as the universe is one, and the good and the bad, the up, the down, the dark, the light is all part of the whole one. There's no like, and that's us too. So everything is, if you go to the scientific, it's going to get a bit deep, like if you go to the scientific level, everything is energy. E equals mc squared means energy and matter are interchangeable. So everything on this planet is atoms, or not just this planet, in the universe. Atoms, protons, electrons, neutrons, waves, particles in some way, shape or form. It's all energy. And from the camera you use to your body, to the air that you breathe, to the water that you drink, everything is energy vibrating on a different frequency. And so my system, or my belief system, is that everything is just energy vibrating on different frequencies, and it's up to us to either tap into basically the bad parts, the good parts, because I believe you can't have the bad without the good, the up without the down, the dark without the light. And so there's no separation from what people will call God. It's all divinity. Divinity is everything. It's the bad and the good. And so yeah, a lot of the misconceptions about me is that I'm some kind of atheist, because I question, because when it comes to the religious subjects, people tend to generally separate themselves from God and say, you know, we are the creation and God is separate from the creation. And one of my biggest arguments is if we came from God, if you believe that, then how are we not a part of it? How are we not it? Because I know I've got a child, my son's 9, and he's me. His genetic code is mine and his mum's. So he can't say he's separate from me. He can't just say he didn't just pop out of thin air. Do you know what I mean? So for me, everything comes from a pre-existing substance or material. So that table right there used to be a tree. Before it was a tree, it was a seed. Before it was a seed, it came off another tree. And that was a tree that came from another tree. And so the connection and the line and everything being connected to the glass on your phone, it was sand on the beach, because that's how you get glass. You get glass from sand. So I keep telling people, everything's just constantly connected. Nothing ever truly is, when it comes to energy, energy cannot be destroyed. The laws of thermodynamics state that energy can never be created or destroyed. It just continuously transforms. So if everything's transforming, that means everything's already been here in one way, shape or form. And so it doesn't really go anywhere. So that's my system really as a pantheist, and people generally don't ask about it. They just say, oh, you're criticizing religion, that means you're an atheist. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, nope, I'm not an atheist, I'm a pantheist.
Right, powerful. So in terms of you questioning things and your journey, was there a point where this started for you, like in your journey? Because I know, like for me, there's levels of trauma and then going, this can't be normal.
Right.
Or wanting to see my people healed, or to be like relating in a more healthy way. Is there something for you that is just kind of like the start of your journey?
Yeah, the start of my journey was probably a book called The Ideology of Racism. I'll never forget this book. I bought this book probably about going on 20 years now, 19 years, something like that. And I read that book, and that book started making me question what he said, called the ideology of racism, because I wanted to know what racism actually was, like why it exists, why people go through it, what's the motivation for it. And reading that book, there was just so many different like wow moments for me reading that book. And what it done is that it sent me on a journey, because I went to the back, read the bibliography, where did this guy get his research from? And so the man's name was Samuel Yuboah. And so I just started collecting the books that he was using for this book. And so I just started reading, and I was constantly reading and studying for about 15 years, just for myself. Like, it's crazy. Like, if I was on the train, I always had a book. If I was at home, I was always reading. And so, yeah, that was like the journey started for me about 19 years ago. Like, for me, I talk a lot to people, do you know what I mean? And my first initial thing is not to get offended by something that someone says. It's to try and understand why you said it and where it came from. And so not a lot of people are like that. A lot of people are like, what, you said that? And they get angry, they get emotional. But for me, like, if someone calls me a nigger, for example, I'll be like, okay, cool. One of the things that I learned from a guy called Neely Fuller, psychologist and psychiatrist in America, said, if someone calls you a nigger, you just have to ask them, what is a nigger? And if they say it, you say, okay, so what do you think should be done with niggers? And then just see where they land after that question, because most of the time, you'll get to see someone's psychology and realize they're talking absolute nonsense anyway. Do you know what I mean? So I just wanted to understand the psychology, and after reading that, I read the ISIS papers, I don't know if you've read that, which kind of goes into racism psychologically and why it exists from a psychological standpoint. And these are the conversations I like to have, because a lot of the time, the why is the reason, and no one asks the why. Everyone just says, oh, that person's a racist, and that's that, and this is that. And it's like, okay, but why? Why are these people like this? And what I did find is that when you ask the why, that's what causes all the problems, because people don't want to deal with the why. Like, they just don't want to deal with the why. They just prefer to just say, yeah, but that person's sexist, or that person's racist. It's like, okay, cool. Why?
The why is often self-worth.
Yeah, exactly, because the why makes you want to look inside yourself and make you ask questions of yourself that a lot of people aren't necessarily willing to go to. So it's like, no, I always want to understand the why, because, you know, I experienced racism, but I always wanted to know why. Like, why do you feel a certain way about someone? For what reason? What's your motivation? Because my thing is, I don't just believe people wake up in the morning just one day and start to say, okay, I'm going to do this to this person just because they look different. I'm just like, that's a little bit too simple for me. I want to know the psychological reasons behind it. So yeah.
So what's your why? So why are you doing what you're doing in the way you're doing?
I'm doing what I'm doing because I want people to question deeper than what they generally do. Because I find that a lot of conflicts that happen, just whether it be in your family, in work, in the world, can be easily stopped if people actually stop to think, more so than get led off the emotion of any situation. So for me, I just want people to try and understand themselves more, and in turn they will understand how they interact with other people and understand the world more. So yeah, that's why I do what I do. And I know also it's not going to be for everyone. Do you know what I mean? Not everyone's going to want to actually look inside their heart, their mind and their soul and try and work things out. Some people just like, just because, innit? Do you know what I mean? But for me, that's just not, it's not good enough for me.